Okay, we're going to talk about the period from the 1670s to 1815, which is what some historians call the end of the beginning in terms of the relationships between natives and Americans, or American colonists who would then become Americans. So, to illustrate kind of the changes that could happen to people's lives, what we have here is a raid, an artist's image of a raid, Native American raid on a town called Deerfield, Massachusetts, that happened in 1704. These artist renderings were obviously created long after that. This one on the top left in 1900, and then an illustration here of Eunice Williams. So on May 26th, 1713, there was a small version of an international conference that occurred in a town called Kahnawake, which was a town populated primarily by Mohawk Iroquois, and it was sort of a praying town where they practiced Catholicism, influenced by French missionaries. A visiting trader named John Schuyler had been asked to meet with some of the natives in that town, and he had been rowed out to meet some people. And he announced that he, quote, proposed to know why this poor captive should be married to an Indian, being that she was Christian born. And who that poor captive was Eunice Williams. Eunice Williams had been captured in 1704 in a raid on Deerfield, Massachusetts, and that was part of a series of conflicts that occurred between 1689 and 1713, which was part of Anglo-French rivalry to control various parts of the world, including North America. Altogether, raids during that period had netted the natives hundreds of captives, of which Eunice Williams was one of them. Most of the captives survived, although not everyone did. Eunice Williams had also been captured with her mother and infant sister, who passed away. But most of them did survive, and those captives who survived were generally sold by their captors to French purchasers, and some of them would become servants in French-Canadian households, and then sometimes the French traders would trade those captives back to the English in exchange for French prisoners or money or other concessions. And so most of the captives who wanted to go home had gone home by 1713, the people who had been captured in prior years. So Williams, though, Eunice here, she had elected to stay with the Mohawks. Schuyler's mission was remarkable because Eunice Williams was unusual among English captives. For one, the Deerfield raid had been one of the most successful Native American attacks on an English town, and many people were seized there. And for that same reason, it was this kind of shocking event for a lot of New England colonists. More important than that, Eunice Williams was the daughter of a man named John Williams, who was Deerfield's Puritan minister. And he was a member of the Puritan elite in Massachusetts. Williams had been traded back to the English years before, and he had then remarried his wife. Remember I said the wife and infant daughter had died, and in the captivity struggle. And he was quickly redeemed by his family back in Massachusetts and resumed preaching, and he had also written a best-selling book called The Redeemed Captive Returned to Zion, who presented Deerfield as this Puritan outpost that had saintly inhabitants who were martyred and suffered at the hands of Indian savages and French Catholic papists, both bad things. And so for several years, John Williams had tried to campaign to buy his daughter back from the Mohawks. And he had gained a lot of support among influential colonists. And at his requests, a number of priests sent for Williams, who came quickly, accompanied by her husband. So Eunice Williams was now 16, and she had married a Catholic Mohawk named Arosen, Arosen. So Arosen Williams couldn't speak much English. She had been captured as a young child. She had forgotten most of her English. She spoke Mohawk. Schuyler began telling her, so he met with the natives in the town where she was, and he asked to meet her, which she came out with her husband, and he began telling her what Williams already knew, that most of Deerfield's surviving captives had been brought back, including her brother and her father, and they really wanted her back too. And so she understood what Schuyler was saying, but she didn't say anything. She'd lost most of her ability to speak English. And so he talked to her again, and Schuyler kept going. And he asked for a more modest request after she didn't reply to any of his requests for her to come with him. And instead he said, well, will you agree to at least meet your father? And if you still want to go back to Kahnawake, go back to live with the natives. And she still said nothing, and they talked for 2 hours. And she eventually said in Mohawk, Jakte Okthe, which meant maybe not. Schuyler then angrily condemned Williams for callously betraying her father and got really upset. And he went back to Montreal and sent a message to John Williams, Puritan minister, that he had failed in his mission. What Eunice and Arosen made clear was that their whole kind of cultural context had changed. She had been adopted into a Native American family and married a Native American husband. Among white New Englanders, the man was in charge of the household, but among Mohawks, the husband was a guest of the mother's family. And so when you got married, the man lived as kind of a house guest almost of the mother's side. And from Eunice's standpoint, John Williams, her father, had broken their relationship by marrying again because he had moved into this new family, which, and so to her father had entered into this new family with this new woman, and was no longer part of the connection they had through her mother. So from her view, her father had abandoned her. On the other, and at the same time, her husband's family had adopted her. And so she felt that her family, her life was now with the Mohawks. For John to ask Eunice to join his family was unthinkable for her because of the connection that she now had. There was continuing ties between her, and Eunice did visit Deerfield again and at least met with members of her family later in life, but she never did live with them permanently. And she always connected more with the female side of the family, not so much the men. There were continuing ties between Mohawks in Kahnawake and Deerfield because of these captive relationships. And so what this represented was kind of an experience of war, captivity, and dislocation that natives around the colonial areas all experienced, and the white colonists also experienced. The scope of wars broadened over time. The wars got more serious. They became more connected and fused with imperial connections with England, between England and France. They brought in their native allies into this, and natives also tried to pursue their own interests at the same time. As a result, Native American communities throughout the 18th century became more dispersed, and more Indian people than ever were captured in raids and invasions by other natives. And Indian captives frequently joined with other refugees to form new communities, just like Eunice and Arosen had. They reinvented themselves. So this added to kind of a multicultural mix of complication in these communities. In some cases, the warfare was devastating. In other cases, the warfare created these new communities. And we're going to talk about kind of how these conflicts progressed. So before I move on, I just want to stress that Kanawaki is an actual place. I think I'm actually butchering the pronunciation, but one thing I don't want us to think is that these places just disappeared or that the people just disappeared. They're still there. So Kanawaki is in Canada, right across from Montreal. So you can see it there. There it is, Mohawk Nation territory. Montreal is right across the St. Lawrence River. And to give a sense of where that is, so Montreal is in Canada, north of Vermont. And if you go there, you can actually see street signs in the Mohawk language. This lady here worked hard to try to preserve the language and put a lot of the street signs around the town. So this says, "Leash your dog."